Hello, and welcome to Lesson 2, Video number 1, a walkthrough of the lesson plan. So here we are with note number 2. This week's lesson is part 2 of writing and language. So we're going to continue with more of the grammar from last week. A lot more. So right off the bat, you can see I've made a couple of changes or improvements to the note format. First thing is I added at the top a link to the video. This will be filled in once the videos are complete and posted on YouTube. I also put a note about formatting in case you forget. The required content and resources are listed in black font. That's the stuff that we really want you to keep in your lessons. You can change the details of how you present it, but the content needs to stay the same. And then there's optional supplemental activities in blue italics. These are activities that are very loose requirements. You can get rid of them and restructure them however you want. Usually if I create a group game or I have some sort of group work activity, I'll list that in blue font. Because if you want to create something different and try it out, you're welcome to. Okay, so jumping into the lesson plan. First thing you're going to do this week is debrief the homework. This is really important. I said last week it's important to check the homework each week. I would go around the room and just write down the names of students who didn't do it, just to encourage students to complete the homework each week. And it's very important to do that at least the first couple of weeks. But you also want to debrief the homework. You want to go over the answers, answer any questions that students may have, again to encourage students to engage with the homework and to show them that you really do care about it and you're going to take time each week to address it. So you want to begin here by just reading off the answers to each question. This might not even be necessary this year because the answers are in the back of the book. You could also just tell students to look in the back of the book. That's something I've done in the past. And then I've listed here in blue italics one suggestion for how you can go over the homework. You might want to do this, you might not. I'll go over what I've written here and then a couple other suggestions of things I've tried in the past. So what's listed here is that you ask each student to identify one or two questions that they struggled with on the homework assignment. You could do this a couple of ways. You could ask students to just write down on a little sheet of paper one or two questions they struggled with and pass it up. Maybe an easier and less time-consuming way is to just go around the room verbally and have everyone name, the one question they struggled with the most. And then you just keep a tally of everyone's responses. If you have 25 students in your room, it should take, a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And then you'll get a tally of which questions were students struggled with the most. Potentially you could end up with 25 students with 25 answers, which doesn't help you, but probably there's going to be 3 or 4 questions that emerge as the hard ones that a lot of students struggled with, and then you can spend the next 10 minutes or so debriefing these particular problems. You don't need to spend time, and we don't have a lot of time to go over easy questions that everyone got right, but you do want to take some time to discuss the questions that students are struggling with. And I found this method very useful because often if you just say, who has questions on the homework? No one raises their hand. And then you get this idea that everyone did really well on the homework, and that's actually not the case. But if you force everyone to go around the room and say the one problem they struggled with, first, students will be less inclined to say they didn't struggle with anything because everyone's admitting they struggled with one problem. And also you get a more accurate picture of what the really difficult problems for the majority of students were. And then, as I said, you can spend time debriefing them. I would encourage students to volunteer how they might solve them and also offer your own 2 cents on how to get the answers. And down here, something important that I said last week too is emphasize the importance of identifying the grammatical rule being tested. The students shouldn't be answering these questions by feel or by intuition. They should be answering them by rigorously identifying the rule and then going through the answers and seeing which conforms to the rule they've learned. So that's one suggestion for how you might handle the homework. There are others. One thing you can do that can be successful if you'd like to is just ask students, which problems do you want to go over? That works if you have, a class that participates a lot. It doesn't work if students don't participate, as I described a minute ago. Something else I've done in the past is had students peer review the homework. So I just say, get in small groups and spend 10 or 15 minutes going over your homework problems, comparing answers. If you got different answers, discuss them. You can read the explanations in the back of the book and raise your hand and ask me if you have questions. And I'll use that time to walk around the room and check people off for the homework. I found that mixed results with this. It's successful, and students usually do discuss and I think do learn from each other and work out problems. It can be unsuccessful in that students don't always focus. Sometimes they just take a glance at the assignment and start gossiping. And they also are sometimes not inclined, sorry, I'll stop highlighting random things. They are not inclined to ask you for help. So they'll they'll discuss and they'll figure out that neither one of the people in the pair knew how to solve a problem, and then they won't ask you for help. So I think probably the thing I listed in blue here is the best bet for really getting an accurate picture of what students struggled with. But you're welcome to try other things, try different things each week. It's up to you. Next we have the Elements of a Happy Sentence Part 2 slides. In case you thought the fun was over last week, there's much, much more fun this week with more elements of a happy sentence. And there's a separate video in this series that goes over these Part 2 slides. Then we have a really long chunk of blue italic font. So it's time this week to start playing some group games. And we're going to start with a grammar game this week. So again, this is just a suggestion. I think games are probably the thing I encourage you more than anything else to be creative with and develop your own. I think if you create a game and you're really into it and having fun, the students will too. But I've listed this week, and in future weeks I'll list some games that I've tried that I've liked. I've tried a bunch of different things, and some of them have failed horribly, and I've decided to share the ones that didn't fail horribly with you. So here's one that has actually been pretty successful. I've never played it in this context, but I've done it in math classes that I've taught, and students have really loved it. So the way it works is you write down for yourself this list of problems, or just keep it open on your laptop, but be able to reference this list of problems. Then you divide the class into groups of exactly 4 students. If you can't divide the class into groups of exactly 4 students because your number of students isn't divisible by 4, I'll talk about what to do in a second. But assuming for a second you've managed to effectively divide the students into groups of 4, then you assign each student in each group a letter, A, B, C, or D. So there should be one letter per group. So like group 1, one student has A, one student has B, one has C, one has D. Group 2, one has A, one has B, one has C, one has D. So every group has a person assigned to each letter. Then you go up to the whiteboard and you divide it into sections. So I just sort of draw lines down it, and I write in the corner, like this is group 1 section, this is group 2 section, this is group 3 section, etc. Okay, then you're done setting up. You explain the rules of the game to your class. And since you haven't done this before, I'll just explain the rules to you right now. So the way it works is that there's a series of face-offs between groups. It's a very fast-paced game. So at the beginning of each face-off, you randomly select one of the 4 letters and one of the problems above, and you announce your selections to the class. So that's why you need have the problems on hand, so you can announce the problem number to the class and also a letter. And in the past, I've written them down on papers and put it in a bag and drew it from it, so it's really random. You don't have to do that. You can just make it pseudo-random by saying one. So then you announce the problem, and then groups work together to solve the problem. Not only to come up with a correct answer, but also to identify the grammatical rule being tested in the question. I keep emphasizing that. I think it's really important. Then, once all the members have agreed on an answer and which rule has been tested, the person whose letter you announced at the beginning has to go up to the board and write both the correct answer and the rule in their designated section of the board. So for example, if you said, we're going to do problem number 3 and the letter is B, okay, then all the groups start talking and they spend 30 seconds or a minute talking about the correct answer, and then the person who was assigned B from every group goes up to the board and writes the answer, the letter of the answer they think is correct, and the rule that they think is being tested. So that's that. But of course, this is a game, this is a competition, so there are points involved. So the way it works is that the way I've done the scoring in the past is that any group that comes up with a correct answer and rule gets 1 point, but the first group to write the correct answer and rule gets 2 points. So there is a time element. And a group gets no points if they have an incorrect answer, and they also get no points if they don't identify the grammatical rule. If they just sort of write a letter, maybe they picked randomly or something, they don't get points. You have to give me, or they have to give you, a grammatical rule and a correct answer. And that's how one face-off works. And that whole thing takes a minute to a minute and a half, even though it took me 5 minutes to explain. And then the process repeats until all of the questions for a round have been announced. You'll see that I divided the questions into 2 rounds. And then you tally the points and announce a winner. Okay. So some more notes down here. After you explain the rules to the class, you can just jump into playing. As I said, I divided the questions into 2 rounds. I did this because if you intersperse them, you'd have to say page numbers each time, and students would be flipping back and forth, and there's different page numbers for different books, and it would be an awful mess. So instead, what you should say is, okay, round 1, if you have 2018 edition, we're on page 314, 2016 edition, page 350. And after that, for each, little face-off, you just say question 3, question 15, question 16, because the numbers are the same. Then you finish that, you announce a winner, and you say round 2, these page numbers, and those question, and you cycle through those question numbers. So that's that note. Then down here, be sure that you call on different letters in each face-off. If you're just doing this in your head and just calling letters, make sure you alternate through all the letters. My whole motivation sort of behind creating this game and creating this format is to get everyone to participate. Because I've noticed in teaching and also my experience as a student that often when teachers play group games, what happens is there's like 5 people in a group, and there's this one guy who's like really into it and really like comfortable with the material, and they will solve everything. And all the other students like sort of sit there and are like, yeah, go whichever person knows all the material. And it ends up being not very fun and really lopsided. And yeah, I want to avoid situations like that. So in this format, because you assign everyone a letter, you randomly call letters, and the person whose letter you called has to be the one who goes to the board, everyone has to participate at some point. So it helps to balance out the groups, so like the group with the one person who's really comfortable with the material doesn't dominate. So it balances between groups and also within groups, if that makes sense. So I really like this format, and if you don't choose to use this game, I encourage you to try to create a game or an activity that can get everyone to participate. I think that's really important, and that leads to more successful and experiences for the students. Then, optionally, you can distribute prizes like food or candy to the winning team. I always do this. It always raises the stakes and makes it more fun. I always say at the beginning that there will be a prize, and then I reveal it at the end. I don't know, I sometimes just bring whatever candy I have laying around in my room, or just buy chocolate bar for $1 or something. This is totally up to you. It's optional. PTPS doesn't reimburse food costs, so don't feel obligated to do this, but it is fun. Students will like you if you give them chocolate. It's a proven fact. What else do I want to say? Yes. So here, a note, like I said earlier, about what to do if you can't divide your students into groups of 4. Then it gets a little tricky. The easiest solution is maybe you can divide them into groups of 3 or 5, because the total number of students in the class is divisible by 3 or 5. If you can do that, just do that, and then instead of using A, B, C, D, you just use ABC or use A, B, C, D, E. That's an easy solution. But sometimes you won't be able to do that. The number of students won't be divisible by 3 or 4 or 5. And so you'll have to just have some groups with extra students. I give an example here. Let's say you have 17 students. What I would do is just create 4 groups. 3 of the groups will have 4 students. 1 of them will have 5 students. There's an extra student. And the reason mismatching group numbers is difficult in this game is that everyone's supposed to have a letter. So what do you do if there's one group has an extra person? Well, what I would do is just assign in that group of 5, give 2 people the letter A. So all the groups still have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, but this large group has 2 A's. And just tell the people who both have A's that whenever you call the letter A, they should alternate who goes up to the board. It's not a perfect solution, but we don't need to overthink this. It's not a huge problem, and I think that's a quick solution. If you think of something better, you are welcome to try it. Alright, and that's the game. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Feel free to try it or to try your own. If this didn't completely make sense, or like you're listening to me explain this for 10 minutes and all the complexity and you're thinking there's no way this is fun, this is an awful idea, we're going to play this in decal this week. So I'm going to sort of try this with all of you teachers and divide you into teams and have you all try this game. And I think you'll gain a better understanding of how it works from doing it in decal. And then you can judge better whether it is good or whether it sucks. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But that's the game. Then, after the game, the fun continues with even more elements of a happy sentence. That's right, it didn't end with part 2. It continues with part 3. Students will love you forever when you present this 3rd set of grammatical rule slides. Yeah, there's a lot of slides for these lessons. There were even more slides last year. So if you're a new teacher, just imagine, or I don't know what I'm getting at. But I've tried to cut down the slides, but there's still a ton of grammatical rules the students have to know. And really the only way to get them to understand this material is to go through, just go through it. So this week is a lot of slides and a lot of information, but it's interspersed with games and activities. So hopefully it's not too bad. And then finally, as last week, we have an exit slip. The link is almost the same, except instead of exit 1, it's exit 2. Again, there's questions. Again, there is a response form that you can sort. That's all set up in the drive already. And then here at the bottom is the homework. This is similar to last week's homework. Just want them to answer questions from the book. There are more questions this week. It's only 30 questions total though, which I think is not too many. They're just short grammar problems anyway. And for each question, as last week, students should write down the grammatical rule being tested, their guess at the answer, and an explanation of why they think it's correct. Having them do this in the homework and the activities and the games, I really think this is how you need to approach the grammar section if you want to get a high score. And then tell them to bring evidence of the assignment next week, of course. And then here, to do after your second class, I'll put this at the bottom of every note. It'll basically say the same thing. Week 1 has extra stuff, but from here on out, there's 2 things you have to do at the end of every class. One is email students the homework assignment, to make sure they get it. And 2 is you post the lesson 2 materials, or the lesson whatever for whatever week materials, into your class Google Drive that you created last week. I think there was something else I wanted to show you. Yeah. So one thing that I did make a little change to after last week was that I added this homework folder. So before in the videos last week there was no homework folder, but I added one to lesson 1, and there's going to be one for lesson 2 and all the subsequent lessons as well. And this will just have a Google Doc version of the homework. So the homework is on the note, but there will be this sheet as well. The reason I did this is you might find it easiest to just download, instead of like copy pasting and emailing to students, you might find it easier to just download this as a PDF and then send that as an attachment in an email to students, and they can view the homework assignment in this nice format. This is also a doc that you could post into your class Google Drive for students to access if they missed class or something like that. You don't have to use this, but I thought it might be helpful. So there will be homework. I'll just put the homeworks on Google Docs from now on. And I think that is it. All right. If you want to see me go through the grammar slides, watch the next couple of videos in this series.